The morning sun barely broke through the clouds as Margaret Wilson pushed back her floral curtains. She sighed, looking at the calendar on her kitchen wall, where she had circled today's date in red marker. At 81 years old, Margaret hated having to deal with money problems. For 42 years, she had taught third graders how to read and do basic math, but now she struggled with her own finances since her husband Tom passed away 3 years ago. Just get through today, she told herself, rubbing her swollen knuckles. The arthritis was especially bad this morning. Perhaps it was the coming rain, or maybe it was the stress of knowing she had to go to the bank. Margaret's Social Security check, the money she counted on for everything from groceries to her heart medication, hadn't shown up in her account. 3 times she had called the customer service number, waiting for nearly an hour each time while terrible music played in her ear. 3 times she had been promised it would be fixed. 3 times nothing had happened. "You'll need to come into a branch," the last person had told her. "We can't verify your identity over the phone." As if she was some kind of criminal after banking with them for over 50 years. Margaret moved slowly around her small apartment, the one she'd moved to after selling the family home. Too many stairs, too many memories in that old place. She carefully selected her pale blue dress from the closet, the special one with tiny white flowers along the hem. Tom had always said it matched her eyes. She'd worn it to her granddaughter Lucy's college graduation last year. "Got to look presentable," she muttered, pinning her silver hair neatly. "They already think old people are confused." After a small breakfast of toast and tea, Margaret gathered her documents. She'd stayed up late the night before, organizing everything in a folder. Her ID card, bank statements, social security letter, even old checkbooks. She double-checked the bus schedule on the faded paper she kept by the phone. The downtown bus would get her there by 10 a.m. when the bank opened. Perfect timing. The morning was colder than she expected. Margaret's bones ached as she waited at the bus stop, clutching her purse and folder tightly. A young man with headphones stood nearby, never once looking up or offering her the bench. Times had changed so much. In her day, people looked out for each other more. The bus ride downtown was bumpy, each jolt sending pain through her hip that had been replaced 5 years earlier. Still, Margaret held her head high. She had lived through a world war as a child, raised 3 children on a teacher's salary, and nursed her husband through cancer. A trip to the bank wasn't going to break her. "National Trust Bank," the driver called out. Margaret thanked him as she carefully stepped down onto the sidewalk. The bank building loomed ahead, all glass and stone, so different from the friendly brick building where she opened her first account with Tom after they got married in 1962. Margaret took a deep breath and gripped her walker a little tighter. Inside her purse was the last $20 bill she had until this mess got sorted out. She had skipped buying her blood pressure medication last week, hoping the Social Security money would come through. It hadn't. "Just be polite but firm," she reminded herself, remembering how she used to handle difficult parents during school conferences. "Look them in the eye and don't let them rush you." With determination in her step despite her aching joints, Margaret pushed open the heavy glass door of National Trust Bank. The blast of cold air conditioning hit her immediately, making her shiver. The lobby was busy with people rushing about their day. Bright lights, marble floors, and the constant beeping of machines made it feel more like a spaceship than a bank. Little did Margaret know that this ordinary Tuesday morning was about to become anything but ordinary, and the humiliation waiting for her inside those doors would soon be witnessed by someone nobody expected to see in this small-town branch. Margaret stood just inside the bank doors, clutching her folder of documents. The National Trust Bank was busier than she expected. At least 20 people stood in various lines, their faces glued to their phones or watching the large digital screens overhead. The bank didn't look anything like it had when she first opened an account here with Tom all those years ago. "Where do I even start?" she whispered to herself, scanning the room. The old-fashioned line system was gone. Instead, a row of touchscreen machines stood against one wall with a sign reading "Check in here." Margaret swallowed hard. She had never been good with these new gadgets. Her grandson had tried to teach her how to use a smartphone last Christmas, but after an hour of frustration, they had both given up. She approached one of the screens hesitantly. The bright colors and flashing options made her eyes hurt. "Welcome to National Trust Bank," the screen announced in bold letters. "Please select your service." Margaret reached out with a shaky finger, trying to find an option for Social Security problem or deposit issue. Nothing seemed to fit her situation. "Excuse me," she said to a young man in a navy blue bank vest who was walking past. "Could you please help me with this machine? I need to speak to someone about my Social Security deposit." The employee barely looked up from the tablet in his hands. "Just tap Account Services and then Other Issues," he said quickly, already walking away. "The system will call your number." Margaret stared at the screen, her fingers trembling slightly. She pressed what she thought was the right button, but a new screen appeared asking for her account number. She dug through her purse for her reading glasses, aware that people behind her were sighing loudly. "Ma'am, do you need help or can I go ahead?" asked a woman in a business suit, jingling her car keys impatiently. "I'm so sorry," Margaret said, stepping aside. "I'm still figuring this out." Her cheeks burned with embarrassment. In her day, bank tellers knew customers by name and would wave her over with a smile. After 15 minutes of confusion and growing anxiety, Margaret finally received a ticket with the number 43. The digital board overhead showed they were currently serving number 29. She found an uncomfortable plastic chair in the corner and settled in to wait, her hip aching from standing so long. Time ticked by slowly. Margaret watched as people who had arrived after her were called up to tellers. Perhaps she had taken the wrong ticket after all? She couldn't be sure. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on her shoulders. Without her Social Security money, she wouldn't be able to pay her rent next week. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the electronic voice called out, "Now serving number 43 at window 5. Margaret gathered her things and made her way carefully to the counter, rehearsing what she would say in her head. The teller was a young woman with bright purple nail polish that clicked against her keyboard as she typed. Her name tag read Bethany. "How can I help you today?" Bethany asked without looking up from her computer. "Good morning," Margaret said, placing her folder on the counter. "I'm having a problem with my Social Security deposit. It wasn't put into my account this month, and I've called several times, but no one has been able to help me." Bethany frowned slightly. "I'll need to see your ID and Social Security card, please." Margaret pulled out her driver's license and handed it over. "I have my bank statements and the letter from Social Security showing my benefit amount," she explained, opening her folder. "But I don't carry my Social Security card with me. I was told on the phone that I wouldn't need it." The teller's voice suddenly became louder, as if she were speaking to someone hard of hearing. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but without your original Social Security card, we can't process this request." People in the nearby lines turned to look. Margaret felt her face grow hot with shame. "But I spoke with someone on the phone yesterday," she said quietly. "They told me to bring my ID and bank statements. They never mentioned needing my Social Security card." "Without proper documentation, there's nothing I can do," Bethany announced, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Those are the rules." Margaret's hands began to tremble as she tried to gather her papers. One of her bank statements slipped from the counter and floated to the floor. When she tried to bend down to retrieve it, pain shot through her back. The humiliation was just beginning. A kind-looking man in line bent down and picked up Margaret's fallen bank statement, handing it back to her with a sympathetic smile. Margaret thanked him softly, her hands shaking as she tried to tuck the paper back into her folder. "Perhaps I could speak to a manager?" Margaret asked Bethany, keeping her voice steady despite the lump growing in her throat. She had taught elementary school for over 4 decades. She knew how to stay calm when things got difficult. Bethany sighed loudly and picked up her phone. "I need a manager at window 5, she said, not bothering to cover the mouthpiece. Then to Margaret, "You can step aside while you wait. There are other customers." Margaret moved away from the counter, leaning heavily on her walker. The bank seemed to be getting warmer, or maybe it was just her embarrassment making her face flush. She found a spot near a desk with a customer service sign and waited, watching as people moved efficiently through the line she had just left. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Several bank employees walked by, none making eye contact. Margaret considered leaving, maybe trying again tomorrow after she found her Social Security card in her apartment. but the thought of another bus trip downtown, another morning of anxiety, made her straighten her shoulders. No, she would wait. Finally, a tall man in an expensive-looking suit approached her. His name badge read Edward Parker, branch manager. "I understand you're having some issues today," he said, not quite making eye contact. His attention seemed divided between Margaret and a group of employees huddled near the entrance. "Yes, thank you for coming over," Margaret began, opening her folder again. "My Social Security payment didn't arrive this month, and I've been told over the phone 3 times that it would be fixed, but—" "Do you have your Social Security card with you?" Edward interrupted, checking his watch discreetly. "No, I don't carry it with me. I was specifically told on the phone yesterday that I wouldn't need it. I have all these other documents." "I'm afraid Bethany is correct," Edward said, louder than necessary. "Federal regulations require us to see the original card for Social Security issues. There's really nothing we can do without it." A small crowd of people waiting in line had turned to watch the exchange. Margaret felt as if she were on stage, her private financial troubles now a public spectacle. "But I don't understand," Margaret said, her voice wavering slightly. "I've been banking here for over 50 years. Your bank receives my Social Security deposit every month. Surely there must be some record in your system." Edward's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps you're confused about what you were told on the phone," he suggested, his tone making it clear he thought exactly that. "Our representatives are very clear about required documentation." The whispers started then. Margaret could hear them, people in line commenting to each other. "Poor old lady doesn't understand. My grandmother gets confused about money too. This is why I set up automatic everything for my parents." Margaret's eyes began to fill with tears, not from sadness, but from anger and frustration. She wasn't confused. She knew exactly what she had been told. But standing here, being spoken to like a child in front of a dozen strangers, she suddenly felt every one of her 81 years. "I'm not confused," she said quietly but firmly. "I may be old, Mr. Parker, but I know what I was told, and I know how to be treated with respect." Edward glanced at his watch again. "Look, Mrs. Wilson," she supplied. "Margaret Wilson." "Mrs. Wilson, we have procedures we need to follow. Without the proper documentation, there's simply nothing I can do today. I suggest you go home, find your Social Security card, and come back another time." He gestured toward the door, clearly considering their conversation finished. A tear escaped and ran down Margaret's cheek. She wiped it away quickly with a tissue from her purse. The $20 bill, her last money until this was resolved, seemed to burn inside her wallet. She'd wasted the bus fare for nothing. "Is there anyone else I could speak to?" she asked, her teacher's voice returning, the one she had used when students weren't listening properly. Edward's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked toward the front doors with sudden interest. "I'm sorry, but I need to attend to something. Tracy can show you out," he said, motioning to a young woman nearby before walking briskly away. Margaret stood alone, holding her useless folder of documents, feeling invisible. She had never felt so small, so insignificant in all her years. But fate had other plans for Margaret Wilson that day, and they were about to arrive through the front door. Margaret gathered her strength and decided to try one last time before giving up. She slowly made her way back toward the customer service desk, her walker squeaking slightly on the polished floor. But before she could reach it, the main doors of the bank swung open, letting in a blast of cool air. The change in the room was immediate. Like a wave rolling through the bank, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Phones lowered. Heads turned. Even the tellers paused what they were doing. Margaret looked toward the door, curious about what could cause such a reaction. She had to squint a bit. Her eyesight wasn't what it used to be. But there was no mistaking the tall figure who had just walked in. Elon Musk stood in the doorway, dressed in a simple black t-shirt and dark jeans. His presence seemed to fill the entire room. Behind him were 2 people carrying tablets, both looking efficient and focused. But it was Musk himself who commanded attention. Margaret had seen him on television, of course. Her grandson was obsessed with Tesla cars and talked about Musk all the time during his visits. "That man's going to put people on Mars someday, Grandma," he'd say with admiration. Margaret wasn't sure about Mars, but she had to admit there was something magnetic about the billionaire's presence. The bank staff's reaction was nothing short of comical. Edward Parker, who moments ago couldn't spare another minute for an elderly woman's problems, now rushed across the lobby as if his shoes were on fire. The tellers straightened their postures. Someone quickly picked up a stray piece of paper from the floor. "Mr. Musk, what an unexpected honor!" Edward exclaimed, extending his hand. His voice carried across the now silent bank. "We had no idea you were visiting our branch today. I'm Edward Parker, the branch manager." Musk shook his hand briefly, his expression neutral. "Just need to discuss something about the new Tesla showroom financing," he said. "Your regional office suggested I stop by while I'm in town." Of course. Please come to my office. We'll give you our absolute full attention." Edward gestured grandly toward the back of the bank where the private offices were located. Margaret watched the scene unfold, feeling strangely invisible again, but in a different way. It was as if everyone had collectively forgotten about everything else, including her problem, in the excitement of having a celebrity in their midst. She decided this was probably her cue to leave. With a weary sigh, she turned toward the exit. Her Social Security card was probably tucked away in her important papers box under her bed. She'd have to make the trip again tomorrow. Margaret had just started toward the door when her walker caught on the edge of a floor mat. She tried to steady herself, but her folder of carefully organized documents slipped from her grasp. Papers scattered across the floor, bank statements, ID copies, and letters fanning out like autumn leaves. "Oh dear," she whispered, looking down at the mess. Bending down was impossible with her bad hip. She'd have to ask someone for help, adding one final humiliation to her already terrible day. A few people glanced her way, then quickly looked back toward Musk and his entourage. No one moved to help. Margaret felt the sting of tears threatening again. She blinked hard, determined not to cry in public. Then something unexpected happened. As Edward was leading Musk toward his office, giving an obviously rehearsed speech about the bank's commitment to innovation, Musk himself stopped walking. He had noticed the elderly woman and the scattered papers. For a brief moment, their eyes met across the lobby. Margaret saw something flicker in his expression, recognition, perhaps. Not of her personally, of course, but of her situation. She hadn't expected anyone to notice her today, least of all someone like him, and she certainly didn't expect what happened next. "Excuse me a moment," Musk said to Edward, holding up one finger. The branch manager froze mid-sentence, confusion crossing his face. Without another word, Elon Musk changed direction, walking straight toward Margaret Wilson and her scattered documents. The entire bank watched in stunned silence. Every eye in the bank followed Elon Musk as he walked away from the shocked branch manager and toward Margaret. The silence was so complete you could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning. "Let me help you with those," Musk said simply, crouching down to gather Margaret's scattered papers. His bodyguards exchanged glances but stayed back, clearly surprised by their boss's actions. "Thank you, yo man," Margaret said, not entirely sure how to address one of the world's richest men. She watched as he efficiently collected her documents, taking care to keep them in order. His movements were quick but careful. Edward Parker hurried over, his face a mixture of confusion and panic. "Mr. Musk, please, you don't need to do that. I'll have one of our staff assist this customer." Musk ignored him completely, continuing to gather the papers. When he had collected them all, he stood up and handed the neatly stacked folder to Margaret. His eyes met hers directly, no dismissal, no impatience, just simple human acknowledgement. "Everything okay here?" he asked her quietly. Margaret hesitated. Part of her wanted to say yes, to not make a fuss, to not bother this important man. That's how she was raised. Don't complain, don't cause trouble. But something in his direct gaze made her feel seen for the first time since she'd entered the bank. "Actually, no," she replied, her voice steadier than she expected. "I've been trying to sort out why my Social Security payment didn't come through this month. I've been a customer for 50 years, but they won't help me without my original Social Security card, which no one mentioned I'd need when I called ahead." Musk nodded, listening. Unlike everyone else she'd encountered today, he didn't check his watch or look around the room. He just listened. The branch manager let out a nervous laugh. "It's just a simple misunderstanding about documentation requirements. Nothing to worry about, Mr. Musk. Now, about that private meeting." I'm interested in this situation, Musk interrupted, turning to face Edward. This woman has been a customer here longer than you've been alive, I'm guessing. What's your name, ma'am? Margaret Wilson, she replied, standing a little straighter. I opened my account here in 1962 with my husband Tom. Musk turned back to Edward. And you're telling me that after 60 years, your bank can't verify Mrs. Wilson's identity without her digging out her social security card? In an age of digital verification and account histories, Edward's forehead began to glisten with sweat. Well, sir, we have protocols and security measures. Security measures should protect customers, not punish them, Musk said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The customers waiting in line nodded in agreement. A few even clapped softly. Margaret felt a strange sensation spreading through her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it as relief mixed with a touch of vindication. All day, she'd been made to feel like she was the problem, too old, too confused, too much trouble. Now suddenly, the tables had turned. What exactly is the issue with Mrs. Wilson's account? Musk asked, his tone making it clear he expected a real answer. Edward glanced around helplessly, then motioned to Bethany at her teller window. Pull up Mrs. Wilson's account information, please. Bethany's fingers flew across her keyboard. It looks like her direct deposit from Social Security was flagged because of a system update last week, she reported after a moment. The system required additional verification, but no one followed up with the customer. So this was your bank's error? Musk asked pointedly. It appears there may have been a communication breakdown, Edward admitted reluctantly. Margaret watched in astonishment as the same people who had dismissed her just minutes ago now scrambled to help. It wasn't right that it took someone famous to make them do their jobs, but she couldn't deny feeling a sense of satisfaction. I think Mrs. Wilson deserves an apology, Musk said, crossing his arms. His expression wasn't angry, but it was firm, determined. Edward Parker turned to Margaret, his confident demeanor completely vanished. Mrs. Wilson, I sincerely apologize for your experience today. This is not how we treat valued customers. But this was just the beginning of what would become the most unexpected day of Margaret Wilson's life. The bank lobby remained eerily quiet. Even the security guard by the door had stopped pretending to be busy and was openly watching the scene unfold. Margaret stood a little taller, her hand gripping her walker less for support and more for stability as the situation shifted around her. An apology is just the beginning, Elon Musk said, his voice firm but controlled. What matters now is fixing the problem. He turned to face Edward directly. So what's the solution here? Edward swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing visibly. We can certainly look into expediting the verification process for Mrs. Wilson's Social Security deposit. Looking into it isn't good enough, Musk replied, sliding his hands into his pockets. Actually, I was planning to discuss a potential partnership between your bank and Tesla's new showroom in town. We need a local financial institution to handle customer financing. He paused, letting the words sink in. But I'm having serious doubts about an institution that treats its most vulnerable customers this way. The color drained from Edward's face. Everyone in banking knew what a partnership with Tesla could mean: millions in new accounts, loans, and visibility. In one moment, Edward saw his potential promotion evaporating before his eyes. Mr. Musk, I assure you this is not how we typically operate, he said, his voice taking on a pleading quality. National Trust prides itself on customer service excellence. I don't see excellence here, Musk replied simply. I see an elderly woman who's been a loyal customer for decades being dismissed and humiliated. He glanced at his watch. I have exactly 19 minutes before my next meeting. That's how long you have to resolve Mrs. Wilson's issue completely. One of Musk's assistants leaned in and whispered something in his ear. He nodded and then added, "Oh, and my team will be live tweeting this entire interaction to my 128 million followers. Good opportunity to show how banks either solve or create problems for their customers." The assistant held up her phone meaningfully. This wasn't just about losing a potential business partnership anymore. This was about National Trust Bank's public image being broadcast to millions. A flurry of activity erupted. Edward barked orders at his staff. Phones were picked up. Keyboards clacked urgently. The previously unflappable branch manager was now perspiring visibly through his expensive suit. "Mrs. Wilson, please come to my office right away," Edward said, gesturing toward the back. His tone had transformed completely from condescending to subservient. "I think I'll join you," Musk stated rather than asked, gently offering his arm to Margaret. "If that's all right with you, Mrs. Wilson." Margaret couldn't help but smile. In her 81 years, she'd never experienced anything quite like this. "That would be fine, thank you," she said, letting go of her walker to accept his support instead. Together, they walked toward the manager's office, an unlikely pair that had every customer in the bank pulling out their phones to capture the moment. Margaret heard the whispers change from pitying to admiring. "Did you see that? Someone's finally standing up for regular people. My mom has the same problem with her bank." In Edward's spacious office, things moved with astonishing speed. A phone call to the regional director brought immediate authorization codes. Another call to the Social Security Administration office, with the regional director's authorization, confirmed Margaret's identity without needing her physical card. "It appears the new software update flagged certain accounts for additional verification," the bank's tech specialist explained, having been summoned urgently from the back offices. "Mrs. Wilson's account was affected because she's had the same account number since before our digital systems were implemented." "So it was a glitch in your system?" Musk asked, leaning against the wall with his arms folded. "Yes, sir. One that should have been caught and resolved immediately," the specialist admitted. Edward turned to Margaret, who sat comfortably in the leather chair usually reserved for wealthy investors. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm pleased to inform you that your Social Security deposit has been released to your account. Additionally, we're adding a $500 goodwill credit for the inconvenience." "And?" Musk prompted, raising an eyebrow. Edward cleared his throat. "And we'll be assigning you a personal banker who will give you a direct line to call with any future issues. No more automated systems or waiting on hold." Margaret looked from Edward to Musk, hardly believing the transformation. Just an hour ago, she couldn't even get someone to look her in the eye. What happened next would change banking policies for elderly customers across the country. The news spread like wildfire. By the time Margaret stepped out of the bank's glass doors an hour later, at least a dozen people had their phones out, taking pictures and videos. Some even applauded. For the first time in years, Margaret felt a strange kind of celebrity, though she wasn't entirely comfortable with all the attention. "I really can't thank you enough," she said to Elon Musk as they stood on the sidewalk outside National Trust Bank. Her Social Security deposit had been restored, the $500 goodwill payment was in her account, and she had the direct phone number of Nancy, her new personal banker, written neatly on a business card tucked safely in her purse. "No need to thank me," Musk replied with a small smile. "Banks should work for their customers, not the other way around." He glanced at his watch. "I actually do need to get to that meeting now." One of his assistants stepped forward. "The car is waiting, sir." Margaret nodded and reached for her walker. "Of course. You've done more than enough. I can catch the bus back home. It comes every 30 minutes. Musk frowned slightly. "It's nearly 90 degrees out here. How far is your place?" "About 40 minutes by bus," Margaret admitted, "but I'm used to it." Musk exchanged looks with his assistant, who nodded without needing to be told what to do. "We're heading across town anyway. Let us give you a ride home." Before Margaret could protest, a sleek silver Tesla pulled up to the curb. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a young woman in sunglasses. "Ready when you are, Mr. Musk." Is that one of those electric cars my grandson talks about?" Margaret asked, eyes widening. "It is. Would you like to see what all the fuss is about?" Musk asked, a hint of pride in his voice. Inside the bank, Edward Parker and several employees watched through the window as Elon Musk himself helped Margaret Wilson into the front passenger seat of the Tesla. Their faces showed a mixture of disbelief and concern about what this might mean for their careers. As the Tesla pulled away from the curb, Margaret couldn't help but laugh at the strangeness of it all. "My grandson Tommy won't believe this. He has posters of your rockets on his bedroom wall." "The SpaceX ones?" Musk asked. "I could send him a signed photo if you'd like." Margaret directed them to her modest apartment complex on the east side of town. As they drove, Musk asked her questions about her life, genuine questions about her teaching career, her late husband Tom, and her grandchildren. Not once did he check his phone or seem distracted. In a world where most people half her age couldn't maintain eye contact for a full conversation, his attention felt like a gift. When they arrived at her apartment building, Musk walked her to her door. "It was an honor to meet you, Mrs. Wilson," he said sincerely. "You can call me Margaret," she replied, finding her door key. "And thank you again, not just for the ride or for helping with the bank, but for seeing me when everyone else looked right through me." Musk nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Sometimes the world moves too fast and forgets what matters. The people who built this country, people like you, deserve better. After saying goodbye, Margaret watched from her window as the Tesla pulled away. She made herself a cup of tea and sat down in her favorite chair, thinking about the remarkable day she'd had. The next morning, Margaret's phone rang. It was Nancy, her new personal banker. "Good morning, Mrs. Wilson. I wanted to let you know about some changes happening at National Trust that you might be interested in." As it turned out, Elon Musk had followed through on his promise to tweet about the incident. The post had gone viral overnight, with millions of people sharing stories of elderly relatives facing similar treatment at banks across the country. National Trust is launching a new Senior Banking Respect initiative today, Nancy explained. All customers over 65 will have priority service, simplified verification procedures, and a dedicated helpline. And Mr. Parker wanted me to tell you that he's been asked to personally oversee the program's implementation. A week later, a package arrived for Margaret's grandson Tommy, a signed photo of a SpaceX rocket launch with a note that read, "To Tommy, your grandmother is braver than anyone I've sent to space. Dream big, Elon Musk." And on Margaret's kitchen counter sat a beautiful arrangement of flowers. The card simply read, "Thank you for helping us remember what banking should be about, people, not procedures." Margaret smiled. Sometimes being seen was all it took to change the world, even just a little bit.